Members, the question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr Speaker.
Jenny Salisa.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, for this call on the Education Legislation Bill. We had so many teachers, professionals, parents and a variety of organisations come to present to us at the Education and Science Select Committee, and I'd like to thank them all for their submission. The education legislation in Aotearoa should be simplified, modernised and should be less prescriptive. However, this bill that we're debating in the House today does not deliver on any of those. This is a legislation bill, Mr Speaker, that the Labour Party does not support. This legislation will allow a principal to run multiple schools, a super principal if you like. However, what is the role of a principal right now? They are the supervisor, the mentor for all their teaching staff and support staff. They're the curriculum leader. Principals provide overall leadership for the school. They set the tone and the culture of the school. A principal does more than a full-time job looking after just one school. This legislation will allow a principal to look after and manage more than just one school. However, what would we expect a good principal when they're actually, say, for instance, the manager of up to 4 schools? And how would the relationship work between the principal and, say, the Board of Trustees? Who would be the employer? Would it be one school board? Would it be 2, 3, or would it be, say, for instance, if it's 4, would it be all 4 school boards? These are questions that we asked at the Select Committee. These are questions that were posed by submitters at the Select Committee, and we also asked the officials for their opinion on this, and it wasn't actually clear how issues would be handled. Say, for instance, the relationship, the working relationship between the super principal was to break down. Who would make the call to disestablish the role of that super principal? Would it be one, or would it be all 4 school boards? And who would be the mediator overall, making sure that such a relationship would actually work moving forward? All of these things, Mr Speaker, was not actually answered to our satisfaction at the Select Committee. I move now to the provisions about school opening hours. We in the Labour Party were open to discussing school opening hours, but if we're to look practically at the implications of allowing schools to open at different times. Say, for instance, it's a parent, 2 working parents with 3 kids, 1 at preschool, 1 at primary school and 1 at high school. And if all of these 3 schools were to change their opening hours, say by half an hour in the morning earlier, and then the school in the middle, the primary school changes it, say an hour later, and the high school changes their school time as well, so that it's not well aligned, how would that affect the parents? Especially if they're both working. It will have an impact on their job. Unless both parents work for themselves and are able to actually have control over their working hours, it would affect a lot of our parents. When we posed this question at Select Committee to the officials, the answer that we were given was, oh, the communities at the local level, they will come up with the answer. But what if the primary schools, the intermediate schools and the high schools don't actually get together and make sure that their hours don't align? It will, as I say, affect especially working parents. This legislation will also allow, as we heard from the Honourable Minister, a new category of teaching position, a trainee teacher. And Honourable Parata spoke about Teach First New Zealand. Now, Teach First New Zealand allows for teachers to teach at high school. But what this legislation allows is for trainee teachers at all levels. Now, most of the submitters, when they came to the Education and Science Select Committee, did not agree with this particular proposal. Most of them were teachers, and some of the parents as well, they said things like they want their teachers to be qualified and registered. As a parent, I've got to agree that when I actually send my kids to school, my preference is for the teachers of my kids to be registered and fully qualified teachers. And I'd like to acknowledge my colleague Chris Hipkins at this time, because it was him who actually went begging for our committee to be allowed a period of time for the public to make submissions on this new part to the bill to allow trainee teachers. Allowing trainee teachers to teach all of our students is a proposal that so many of us do not agree with. We prefer, as I said earlier on, Mr. Speaker, that our teachers are registered and 100% qualified. We think that one of the reasons why this proposal is being proposed at this time is, you know, the other legislation that's coming through right now, which would allow bulk funding, global funding. This would actually then ensure that if teachers actually moved on, allowing trainee teachers would be a way for schools to probably manage the funds that they have. As we know, there is not that much funding going to education right now. Compulsory sector has a freezing in their operational funds. I move now to the partnership school model. Allowing our tertiary institutions to sponsor partnership schools or charter schools is, in our opinion, an admission by the government that the partnership school model has failed. When partnership schools and charter schools was actually introduced in this House, we were told that one of the things it would do is it would attract funding from private folks. Capital funding would come in to help establish these partnership schools. When we do a fact check on this, we know that almost all of the charter schools that we have right now, almost all of them, do not have any funding from outside coming in. Most of them are 100% covered by public funding. And what we also know, when we look at the Partnership School Authorisation Board, they have expressed their disappointment at the calibre of applications that they've had coming through to establish partnership schools. And so we think that allowing partnership schools now to be something that polytechnics are allowed to do is indeed an admission by this government that the partnership school model has failed. We know that one of the schools has failed indeed. It is now closed at Whangaruru, and millions of dollars has gone into that school, and we know that we may not even get any of that money coming back to us as taxpayers. Mr. Speaker, Labor strongly opposes this bill. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.